With me is Chris Voss. He is the author of Never Split the Difference, and he also has more than 20 years of experience doing hostage negotiations for the FBI, and a number of those years he was the FBI's lead international hostage negotiator. Thank you, Chris.
My pleasure. I'm really happy to be here.
So the way I came across Chris and his book is that the end of last year, I was trying to decide which books I wanted to read, and I asked a number of my smartest friends what their favorite books were for 2016, and more than one of them told me it was this book, Never Split the Difference. And so,
well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, it's true. And so I picked up the book and I dug into it on a flight back from Kuala Lumpur, and before I knew it, I was addicted to it, and I cold emailed you, and here we are today.
You know, and it's in immortal words of Wayne Gretzky, you know, a shot on goal is never a bad shot, right? You just reach out to somebody.
Exactly, and that's what cold email is about. So today what we're going to be talking about is how we can apply all those lessons from the book and your career to sales and sales negotiation. And so my first question for you is, Chris, so you have a lot of skills you've learned with the FBI and just with negotiation in general, but how do you think these lessons can apply to sales and selling?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, you know, it's the fundamentals of effective human interaction that lasts. You know, those ideas are all the same. And, you know, the one thing that I think makes some of the biggest difference in sales, a very counterintuitive idea to stop trying to pressure people to say yes. You know, I was talking to a chiropractor just the other day, and he bought this program. He said, I got this momentum sales program, you know, get momentum. Mm-hmm. And it was all about getting people to say yes. And then he said, you know, you get them to say the little yeses and they'll give you the big yes. Well, you know, people are so used to that. I mean, this whole idea of getting the yes going, mm-hmm. Probably, I'm sure at one point in time it was a good idea. But it's so overdone that what happens is people feel trapped by it. They've had 8 people today try to get them to say yes to stuff, and they know it's always going someplace. So human beings around a planet have kind of become battered children. You know, you could try to hug a battered child. They've been battered so much that they're going to flinch anyway and move away from you. And mm-hmm. most of the planet is yes battered. You know, they're yes battered. So the first thing to make a connection is to just stop doing that. And we stopped doing that. You know, we taught people to stop doing that by first, you know, trigger a no. Instead of saying, have you got a few minutes to talk? I teach people to say, is now a bad time to talk? Mm-hmm. You know, instead of saying, would you like to do this? Would this be good for you? We say, is this a ridiculous idea? Uh-huh. To just first just get out of the yes battering. Yeah. And they open up. I mean, people open up. And that's one of the things that, you know, we brought out a hostage negotiation.
That's so interesting. I mean, it makes sense in a lot of ways because it's very easy for people to lie and say yes, but I think the pure act of saying no is even a little bit uncomfortable, and not just out of the ordinary, but like maybe even hardwired uncomfortable. So by saying that, maybe you have gotten them into some kind of different pattern, not just one that they're used to with people conditioning them to say yes all the time, but maybe one that's even deeper than that.
Well, and it's what you're saying no to.
Yeah, that's true.
And there's a difference also between, you know, what it's like to say no and what it's like to hear no. Mm-hmm. I mean, so what it's like to say no is you feel protected. No is protection.
That's true.
You know, example I like to use a lot, like when my son was 17, and every parent has done the same thing. You know, you hear the words, Dad, can I? And you say no before they're even done. And and looking back on it, I realized that every time I said no to my son, then I would wait for a second, and then I'd say, all right, so tell me again what it was you wanted. Mm-hmm. Because having said no, I felt protected, and now I'm willing to listen. So if that goes on between a parent and a teenager, why not take advantage of that same basic psychological dynamic in every other interaction? A real estate salesperson can say, they're used to saying, well, do you want your home to sell?
Mm-hmm.
Because every person who's selling a home is going to want more than what the market is going to bring, even in a hot market most of the time. They got a 3-bedroom house and they want to get as much for their house as their neighbor who had a 5-bedroom house and a pool. And that's just not going to happen. And a real estate person is going to want to say, well, do you want your house to sell? You flip that question to, do you want your house to languish on the market and not sell?
Mm-hmm.
Well, no.
Yeah.
It's just flipping they're not saying no to you. They're saying no to something they don't want in collaboration with you. And that's just one of the approaches.
And I think there's an important juxtaposition there that you're doing, because you're really making them think about the alternative. And so it's not just not saying yes on autopilot. It's also, okay, what is the consequence of that no?
Right. And the consequence is potentially a loss, and loss drives people more than gain does,
mm-hmm.
which is completely opposite what most of our thinking is. There's a couple brilliant Israeli psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. They ended up winning the Nobel Prize over this idea. This is not how people should be, it's how they are. And Kahneman and Tversky, prospect theory is what it's called. They nailed down that people are motivated more by loss than they are by gain. So it's in many cases just a matter of reframing.
No, that's so true. And we see that all the time in copywriting. So our sales emails that have performed the best, our cold emails, pretty much always have played more on that negative fear of loss. And that's not accusing people of like, you're doing this wrong and getting them defensive and aggressive. It's making them think about what the alternative is if they don't do something, and sometimes not even directly at them, but like an anecdote, like this is what happened to so-and-so, and painting a picture of someone else, or I heard from another VP of sales, blah, 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 this complaint. And so even subtly tying the two together, I think can help. But yeah, okay, that was a great answer.
Thank you. Try to give me good answers.
Yeah. My next question was going to be about provoking no, but I think you actually covered that pretty well. So we can just skip past that one. But I guess one that I'm really interested in is, you talk a lot about questions, and we were already kind of talking about that, but there's a lot of different strategies that you talk about in the book, and I'm sure even more that around questions and how to ask the right kinds of questions to really get through to people and break down their barriers. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And by the way, some people are having audio problems, which is not normal for this platform, but I apologize if there are. Definitely try refreshing or closing Chrome, but we will have a recording as well if you have any issues, so don't worry. But anyways, sorry, Chris. I'd love to hear more about questions.
Yeah, and I want to make two real important points in regards to questions, because what's the purpose of questions in the first place? Well, the purpose of questions, what it is to elicit information. I mean, so, and the reason why I put, why am I asking that? Because there are other good ways to elicit information than asking questions. Like some people don't like answering questions until they've had 2 or 3 days to think the answer through and all the implications of the answers. Now, so you don't ask a question because you want to wait 3 days for the answer. You ask a question because you need the information now. So I'll talk about the best way to shape a question, to calibrate it, if you will, so it hits your target. That's why we call them calibrated questions. And then also how to get people who are leery of questions to respond without asking a question and give you information. All right, so the first thing, the first issue, the calibrated questions. This is sort of like a fine, focused and refined set of what we refer to as open-ended questions. We're going to cut those down, and we're going to stick mostly to what and how questions. And we're going to be extremely leery of why as a question. And because we want to ask why, of course, you often need to know why, but why makes people feel defensive? And that gets, we're battered by why also, and we get battered by our parents because when we were little, every time we did something wrong, our parents would say, "Why did you do that?" And so from a very early age, we became conditioned that nobody asks us why unless we've done something wrong, which means it provokes defensiveness. So if you need to know why, but you don't want to ask why, instead of saying, why are you doing this? Why are you doing business with that person? Why have you selected that option? Just change your why to a what and say, what made that a good idea? What caused you to make that selection? What caused you to choose that product? What caused you to pick that course of action? You then remove the sting of accusation out of it, and it's a great what question. Again, our primary questions are what and then how questions. And so then you get a great answer if they're in a question answering mode. So the flip side is, now what do I do if they're not going to answer questions and I still need information? Well, the way we trigger information in that regard is we use this sneaky hostage negotiation skill. In hostage negotiation, we call it an emotion label. Now, in adapting it for business, we just call it a label. And instead of asking someone why they did something, you might say, well, it seems like you had a reason for doing that, or it seems like you had a reason for making that selection. That's just an observation. Now, the person who is leery of questions, interestingly enough, will respond to that. They don't want to wait 2 days. What happens is the way that's constructed, and it's very concise, it seems like, when you say it seems like to someone, what happens with their brain is causes a communication in their brain where they actually do a query inside where they kind of ask themselves, they said it seems like this, do we think it's true? The different components of the brain are now interacting. They feel in control, then they're not being cornered to answer, and they'll come back with an answer. So that was actually one of the most interesting things about adapting hostage negotiation for business. When I first left the Bureau in 2007, that tool, the label, I actually thought it was the least important of the 8 skills, the FBI 8, that we were bringing out. Now we've come to learn and how to use this. It's actually the most important skill. It's the most powerful. It's the most universally applicable. And when you learn, this simple tool, but actually about 4 different ways to use it, that with practice come very easily. It just takes practice. Our students, our clients, we're making phenomenal breakthroughs with this real simple skill.
And why do you think the label is so important, especially in the case of business? Do you think it is actually more important just overall, or just with business versus hostage negotiations?
No, overall, it's the subtlety of it is what makes it so important. If I say to you, it seems like that being in New York makes you happy.
Yeah.
You're not just going to say yes to that. You're going to want to say more. You're going to want to add to it.
Yeah.
Also, since it was just an observation and not a question, questions let people know that you want an answer. You're trying to get them to talk. If I give you the option with a label to talk or not, your defensiveness doesn't go up. Then the really interesting thing is sometimes an intentional mislabel. Well, it seems like you don't like New York at all. Your answer would be like, no, I love New York, and here's what I love about it. It actually provokes a more unguarded information. Do you try to use
contradictions then a lot of times to try and get them to like, no, that's not at all okay?
Yeah, not exclusively.
Yeah, but it's one tactic. Yeah.
People really give you unguarded information when they're correcting you, because people love to correct.
Yeah, no, I can really see actually specifically how one of the friends that recommended the book uses this on me regularly, and I walk into the trap. But now I'm trying to think of how I'll use it on him. How do you defend against that, though, when you are in that situation and you have someone on the other end that's actually a very skilled negotiator that maybe knows you very well? maybe it's a long business cycle or a sales cycle. How do you really defend against someone doing that?
Well, or do you need to defend?
Yeah. Do you just stay quiet, ignore it, deflect?
Well, there's two issues. You know, I like negotiation skills and strategies that are good for both missionaries and mercenaries. I like to say.
I like that.
You know, we use the mercenary stuff because it works, and also the missionary is somebody who actually has your best interest at heart. So, you know, I want people who do business with me to understand that I want them to prosper long term, because I'm going to be wealthy with a long term prospering partner. So I don't need to defend myself from that person, because they're going to help me move forward. You know, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with a group, go with a team. So I'm always on the lookout for people that are great colleagues, great teammates. And if they're on my team, I don't have to defend myself. And what happens when you are doing business with somebody you do have to defend yourself? Well, you know, that's part of our approach also. You know, if you forgive me, you know, we like the analogy of the Starship Enterprise, because the Starship Enterprise in every TV show and movie went out to make collaborations, to partnership, to explore, to learn, to have good partners. But if they got into a fight, they were certainly capable of fighting. So, you know, I'll feel you out long enough, you know, and if I understand at some point in time you're trying to hurt me in a business deal, well, my first question is, do I still want to be in the deal anyway? How do I defend myself? And I can't. I mean, I can just make a slight tweak in my approach, and not the least of which is, if I tell myself you can't make me say yes, then I never take myself hostage.
Got it. That's a really great point that you brought up. We have a couple questions from the audience. Someone is asking about more information on questions. This is from Amanda.
Okay.
What else do you want to know about questions, Amanda? See if we get a quick text response.
Well, I'll bet you Amanda is used to asking questions where the answer is yes. And most of us, you know, because there's three kinds of yeses: commitment, confirmation, and counterfeit.
That's great.
So Amanda's probably used to just simply trying to get confirmation yeses. Is this true? Is it Wednesday? Am I in LA? Which I am. But if we were to write down the questions, because we're taught to ask good questions, and we've got this model, you know, the lawyer's model, you know, never ask a question you don't know the answer to. Most of the time, that question is a closed-ended question where the answer is yes. So I bet if Amanda were to write down most of her questions, she'd find out that almost every single one of them was a closed-ended question where she was trying to get a yes. So Amanda, all I'm asking you to do is, first of all, stop it. Ask some what and how questions instead. You know, work in a lot of what and how questions. Give them the feeling that they can expand their answers. Because this technique of the yes questions, lawyers also call it cornering.
Yeah. Why feels like interrogation, like you're being cornered.
Right, which then breaks down the rapport in the relationship. So Amanda, take a look at the questions you're asking and work in the what and how questions.
So on that note, after talking a little bit about the what and how versus why, and fear of loss and some of that, I want to talk about something else you mentioned in the book, which is reciprocity and building trust and creating a sense of kindness in your negotiation environment, which is a lot easier to do in business than it is hostage negotiation. But since you can do that, you know, that's true. Some business people might be harder to be kind to than kidnappers. You never know.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah. All right, so let's start with the trust.
Yeah.
An emotional word. Can I trust somebody? Oh my God, I can't trust them.
Yeah.
All right, here's what I'd ask everybody to think about. Drop in the word predictability. Remove trust. Put in predictability. Because what we're really looking for when we want to know where people are coming from is, what are they likely to do? What can I trust them with? How are they going to react? If you start looking for predictability as opposed to trust, then you're caught off guard less.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then people become eminently predictable. I mean, everybody acts in a pattern. Everybody has habits.
Mm-hmm.
Might not like the pattern, might not like the pattern or the habits, but they become predictable. Terrorists are predictable. I never trusted a terrorist. I just understood, based on my conversations with them, what they were most likely to do and what they really burned for and where they were going. And so as soon as you start thinking about people as how do I predict what they're going to do,
Mm-hmm.
then the issue of whether or not you can trust them falls away.
So
that's the first thing.
Oh, I've got a quick question on that. Then I'll let you keep going because I don't want to derail you too much. But is that sort of removing the emotion to it and just making it more of a fact-driven, observational activity? Is that part of it too?
That's a great observation. Yeah, I think that's absolutely it. Because trust is such an emotional word. If I'm asking if I can trust you, what I'm asking is, will you hurt me when I'm not looking?
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, this just does become very emotional. I become anxious. But if I'm like, all right, so how do I predict what you're going to do? That taps immediately into a different part of the brain. And, we sort of bypass our anxious emotional reactions with that.
That makes a lot of sense. What were you going to say after the trust part? Was it the reciprocity part or?
Well, yeah, it could be reciprocity. Anybody that talks about communication or negotiation is going to talk to you about Robert Cialdini at some point in time.
Of course.
And Cialdini wrote, it's a classic. The book Psychology of Influence is an absolute classic. And it talks about the 6 tools of influence that Cialdini's identified. And one of them is reciprocity. And his concepts, like my concepts, are cross-cultural because they appeal to us because we're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And Cialdini says, look, there's reciprocity in every culture on the planet. It doesn't matter if they're guys giving away flowers in airports, which is one of his examples, pirates on the 7 seas. Reciprocity exists in all human beings, which is why some people instinctively, if you give them a gift, they'll say, I never ask you for that. I never ask you for that. Because they understand that there's a reciprocity trigger that's just been hit with them. On the same idea of the universal nature of what I'm talking about, every hostage negotiation team in the world uses the same skills that this book is based on. The FBI 8, for lack of a better term, FBI 8 hostage negotiation skills, and we added 1, so we've got the negotiation 9. But the hostage negotiators in Cape Town, South Africa, Tokyo, Japan, Bogota, Colombia, Hong Kong, Manila, Philippines, capital of Nigeria is in Nairobi, Kenya.
Oh yeah, Nairobi, Kenya, Lagos.
Yeah, Lagos. They got a hostage negotiation team using the same skills.
Yeah.
How could that be? Because it appeals to people on a human nature.
Yeah.
Every little kid on the planet, when they screwed up, their parents said, why did you do that? Whether you were in New Jersey or whether you were in South Africa, your parents yelled at you.
No, I mean, it's universal human nature. So actually, we have a number of quick questions from the audience. I want to take some of them and then move on, if that's okay. So I'm going to actually go a little bit out of order to just have that flow better. But so Katie has an interesting question that I think I'm going to reframe a little bit, but seems like you have some natural curiosity. What do you do to make yourself more observant and curious if maybe that's not your natural disposition? Or even if it is, how can you work on that and foster that to think more like a journalist or, a hostage negotiator?
All right, so interesting, great question. Fostering your natural curiosity. There's an interesting hack, like in any given day, if it's your goal to see 3 new things that you liked, and that becomes a lot of fun. And then it feeds your curiosity, because what you've done when you're looking for things that you like, you're actually in a positive frame of mind. Your brain works up to 31% more effectively. So what you've just done is you created an enjoyable way to feed your curiosity, and you'll actually pick up more because you're in a positive frame of mind.
So when you say, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you say 3 things that you like, are these literally just like images that could be on Instagram or Facebook, or like, what do you mean by actually doing that?
Well, so outside in your external world, not in a computer.
Not on yeah, got it. So like would you just have 3 things that you like on the wall around you then, or 3
like,
things
all right,
like
so if I'm driving from my apartment to some location in downtown LA, and I look up at the building and I'm looking for something that I didn't see there before that I liked, and I see that there's this cool looking clock on the outside of the building. And I'm like, wow, that was cool. I never saw that before.
So you're trying to notice new, you literally new more than things you like. The new part is the emphasis of it.
Exactly right.
Okay, got it.
And the idea that you're looking for stuff that you like, then what it does is it make you more mentally agile, and you're more likely to do it. Yeah. Because it becomes fun for you, and then it's a self-reinforcing habit. In a very short period of time, your curiosity is just really opened up. Like when you meet a person, what is it that I like about this person? That'll and that actually a positive fun emotion is actually a nice memory trigger. You'll remember more people. You hear somebody's name, ask yourself, what do I like about their name? It increases the chance you remember the name. So it's kind of a memory trick to help you remember more things and sort of expand your horizon and make you more curious about the world.
Got it. That makes sense. I got confused for a second there with the 3 things I like versus new, but
right. Well, it's an overused term on Facebook, right?
Yeah,
like me.
I know, brainwashed. But another question that was kind of interesting, I thought, was let's see, recognizing the negotiation. I guess someone, basically Jane is bringing up, if you notice you're being cornered, what do you do in a negotiation? I think that kind of has to do with what you were talking about before. But is there anything you would like to add to that?
Well, there's 2 real simple skills that you can use to get out of a corner. One is the label, which takes a little bit more practice. I mean, we work with people, it sounds like you're trying to put me in a corner, something that you could just simply say to someone. The other hostage negotiation skill, it's this crazy skill, is called a mirror, and it's just repeating the last 3 words of what someone has just said. And it's a really simple thing, and it's a great thing to practice. Like anybody that's out there, make the rest of the day, make today mirror day. Everybody that you talk to, just repeat the last 3 words of what they said. Of what they said? Yeah.
I was just gonna try it on you.
You're gonna mirror me, huh?
Yeah.
You know what? And you'll be amazed at how that gets you out of cornered situations. I promise you, it's gonna work every time. But don't take my word for it. Try it out.
Great, and that was wonderful. There's another question that was higher up that I sort of want to elaborate and expand on. So it's about actual negotiation and the way that a lot of salespeople deal with it, which is when you give them a price and they say that's too much and they want less. And I think that in itself is a pretty wide topic, since it really depends on like how much can you go down, how much should you go down. It's not black and white. But I mean, we had a situation where one of our potential customers was trying to go down really far below a price that was not profitable. And I used your tactic. How can I do that? Like, that isn't profitable for us. We have da 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 cost. And it was interesting because I think it did throw a wrench in what he was trying to do, but he actually didn't respond for like a day. And what I was going to do, but it happened before I even had to do it, was one of the other parties reached out and basically said, I don't want this to be stalled. I want to keep this going. This guy is like a tough negotiator. He needs some kind of bone. What bone can you throw him of any kind? Something you can add, some kind of discount, anything you can do, because he won't give in otherwise. But like, I understand where you're coming from and we want to work with you. So that was a really interesting and kind of strange situation, because also another piece I'll add is that there was something contradictory to what he said that I noticed before that made me really hold my price. So we were going to do like a medium-sized engagement with them. I won't say the price, I won't say what it was, but medium-sized, like multiple campaigns. And he told me he didn't have the budget, but when I told him, okay, let's do something smaller then, he said, no, we have to do this much. And we have X amount of money, which was bigger than the small amount, but, you know, not as big as the medium amount. But he wanted to get the medium for like the small price, basically, and a bunch of other stuff he requested. And so that's sort of when I knew, like, this isn't truly a budget issue in any way. There's some clients that say it's a budget issue, and then you come back and say, well, you know, maybe we can offer you flexible payment plans, or we can make it smaller, whatever. But the fact that there was that contradiction there, I noticed right away. And so I was not going to back down from it, but I also had to give him some kind of bone that would make him feel like he won, even though I was still winning with what I wanted to charge. So anyways, go ahead.
All right. So the issue is, you know, first of all, and what I'm going to offer to you is a strategy for that.
Yeah.
Again, this is a strategy designed for someone who's just pounding you.
Yeah.
You know, and there are a lot of business people out there that either by their nature or by who they are or their position, all they're doing is pounding you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is for the hard bargainer guy, smash. This is a response for the smash guy, you know, the aggressive, assertive, who just wants to pound you.
Yeah.
And it would be a label, and it'd be real simple. And you say to somebody like that, wow, sounds to me like the value just isn't there for you. Now that immediately, because no deal is ever made on price anyway. There are other things that they want. Everybody knows that. Although we get pounded on price, you know, as soon as you give in a price, they're going to start asking you for other stuff anyway. It's more important. And you need to pivot to that conversation as soon as you can.
Yeah.
And so this is just a label, and this is a diffusing, because then see, the other thing you're describing is a guy who needs to save face. And he can't, if he doesn't win, he at least can't feel like he's going to lose.
Yeah.
So when you say, it sounds to me like the value just isn't there for you, then they pivot to the other stuff that matters to them. Then they tell you, well, you know, they outline everything else. And as they're outlining things, they feel like they're winning.
Yeah.
You know, you've just pivoted away from this give in or get or pounding thing to the other stuff, and the price falls away at that point.
That's a great point. I wish I had done that. I'm glad we were able to win that deal in the end by giving them something free that made them feel like they won. But I think that would have been an even better tactic, and it's one I want to try with the next situation. I have another question that's sort of related to that, that I'm sure. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
I'm going to dive back to this one real quick too, also, because see, your whole deal here is pivoted on giving the other side the right feeling.
Yeah.
You know, your currency in this moment was the feeling of victory for the other side. Now, the challenge then is, how do I use a hostage negotiation skill to give the feeling of victory without giving up anything substantive? If I can seal the deal with an emotional compensation, then I don't have to seal the deal with a dollar exchange. And that's what really this is about. Let's not waste dollars when it's not dollars they want, you had a counterpart who simply wanted a feeling in order of and it would make them want the deal. So this is why hostage negotiation is important, because this is about the currency of payment and feelings.
That's a great point. Yeah, no, I feel like I've gotten a lot better reading your book, but I definitely want to reread things and retry certain things again.
Excellent. All right, good.
So regarding that, though, a similar but a little bit different topic, as far as objections go, and maybe the idea of someone not being ready to move forward with something. And sometimes I think that's something that needs to be respected because the timing just isn't right and they're not going to be a good customer for you. But sometimes I think it's about creating a sense of urgency and obviously showing enough value, which is not a simple question for you to answer. But when you've done everything you think you can, and you're at a point where they're telling you, like, let's come back in 2 quarters, and everything in your gut and based on the conversation is telling you they're ready now. How would you approach that at that point? I think a lot of salespeople talk about urgency, but I think there's a difference between real urgency that's aligned with the customer's needs and false fake urgency that I think can backfire. So, like, what are some of your tips around urgency as far as implementing it, and also like anything you recommend not doing? Because I think there's a lot of bad advice out there around urgency.
All right, so yeah, great question. And it's going to be the use of a what question, what and how questions. And the question is, all right, so what's this problem costing you? What happens if we don't do this? What's this cost you each and every day? If you do nothing, if you sit on the status quo, if you wait 2 months, what happens? How much does this cost you? Maybe it doesn't cost you that much. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. But if you don't do anything, what's it going to cost you? If they're talking to you, they have a problem that is costing them. That doesn't mean that they're going to feel the urgency or that they're not going to be able to forget about it or get distracted by what they're going to have for breakfast or where they're going to dinner. And, people lead such complicated lives, this all kind of gets buried in our head. And, if everybody made the right decision for their business, then half of the Fortune 500 companies wouldn't go away. And in 10 years, half of the Fortune 500 companies in existence today are going to be gone. They're going to go the way of the dodo. They're going to be extinct. They're going to be dinosaurs. The list of the Fortune 500 companies from 10 years ago has turned over almost 50%. So people who are faced with problems are not necessarily making the best decisions. And so we get back to the prospect theory, Kahneman and Tversky, and we ask a question that's designed to guide them back to the reality of the situation. Because if it's not costing them what you need to be compensated, then you need to know that the deal is not there, and you need to move on to somebody you can help who can pay you. And so to find out if an actual sense of urgency exists is to say, look, what's this cost you? What are you up against here? What happens if you don't do anything? What happens if you fail? Successive asking kind of the same question, and all those questions that I just threw out there were pretty much the same question, just asked in a slightly different way. So it's going to be a series of a what or a how question that's designed to uncover what the problem is and then how the problem eats at them every day.
That makes a lot of sense.
And you'll help them understand it. And then you'll know whether or not you should be doing business with them, or they should be doing business with you.
Yeah, no, the same exact principle applies a lot to cold email. Asking what and how questions around their problems that they're 80% or more likely to have, because they'll be thinking about them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like costs, but whatever the consequences that would be really painful based on them not taking action. It's that fear of loss or missing out, of like dealing with a ticking time bomb that is costing them money or some kind of other negative like risk.
Right. And you're just asking them about it.
Yeah,
So
totally.
you're
You're
not
not
doing
even
anything.
accusing.
You're not accusing, or you're not trying to plant a fear or a seed that's not
Yeah.
there. You're
hmm
asking them to just simply take a decent look, a dispassionate look at what the problem is.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Okay, let's see. We have a number of different questions. So this is actually a question from someone at Salesfolk who wanted to know, what do you do if you're actually dealing with someone who isn't only aggressive, but maybe dishonest? What if you're dealing with someone, and hopefully this doesn't happen a lot in business, but it does sometimes, but you're in a situation where someone is leading you on or misdirecting you or being dishonest with you?
Right. So that gets us back to what and how questions.
Mm-hmm.
Because somebody who's dishonest, you're presented with the same problem also as someone who just hasn't thought things through. In either case, the implementation is just not going to be there. And so then you start to, all right, so how are we going to do this? How are we going to move forward? What's going to happen here? How do I know it's going to happen? What are the next steps? How do we address it? These are all implementation focused questions, because we basically we have two different animals that present us with exactly the same thing, the same problem. It's not going to happen. Somebody's lying to you. It's not going to happen. Somebody hasn't thought something through. It's not going to happen. I was in a conversation yesterday with a woman who's trying to get me to come out and speak to a number of different groups. She wasn't lying. She just hadn't thought things through.
Yeah.
And I'm doing the same thing. I'm asking what and how questions. You know, the liar's not going to have answers because they have no intention of implementing. So that's the first thing, the what and how questions. The other thing too is, you know, you mirror, you paraphrase what they're saying. You get the same answer 3 times in the same conversation. If you're talking about implementation and if they are promising to do something, what a liar is real good at is telling you once, basically giving you a yes once, which is why one of our types of yeses is the counterfeit yes, the yes that's a lie. What happens is people who are good at the counterfeit yeses, the people on the other side love yes so much they never ask to say it more than once. And so if you just rephrase it so that they have to say yes again, the second yes, which they're not used to doing, they'll flinch. They'll go yes, and they'll look away. And that tells you that the person is lying, which now you've smoked it out.
Yeah.
And so then instead of accusing them of lying, then you just get to the what or how questions that they can't answer. And they look at you like, all right, so how do I know this is going to happen? Is a question. You know, what will happen? What will we do? And you usually kind of have to ask it through a couple levels. And then you'll uncover that they don't have an answer.
That makes perfect sense. That's really powerful. So with all of that in mind, that's presumably if you're in person with them, maybe even if you're on the phone with them, what do you do if some of this is via written communication, like email or text or something like that? Obviously, the words become a lot more important because you can't hear them.
Right. Well, first thing, because text and emails are two different things.
That's true.
If you treat your emails like text messages, your emails will improve. Here's a mistake everybody makes with emails. It's like trying to play chess and giving the other side your next 7 moves in one email. If you were playing chess, you wouldn't lay out your next 7 moves in an email. You'd lay out 1 move or maybe 2. But as soon as you try to take somebody through multiple steps in an email, they have a starting point and an end point. They look at the difference and they go like, I don't want to do that. And so they'll pick something out in the middle and they'll go off in a different direction.
I mean, even with cold emails, that's true. You want to focus on one simple thing and give them one thing to think about and make it easier. In that case, easier to say yes than no because you want them to respond to you. But it's all about just having it be very, very simple and short and just get them to respond. And then from there, obviously, you can talk to them. But I think you're exactly right. If you're negotiating over email, especially with people in different time zones or something that you can't always pick up the phone with, the shorter the better.
Right. Yeah, I'll put no more than 2 things in an email.
Great
And
to
I'll put the
know.
thing that I'll put a setup for what's most important, and then I'll put you know, if I'm going to ask him a how question, you know, I'll say, look, I'm sure I seem very selfish, and that I don't understand what's going on, but how am I supposed to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll press send on that email. That's a way for me to say no.
Yeah.
And they'll come back collaboratively.
Yeah, that's great. What was it also going to say? We have a few more questions. How are we? We have 15 minutes left. Why don't we do 5 more minutes of questions, and we can go with any questions the audience has. Sound good?
All right. Sure.
Okay. I need to go for the nose with you. I'm trying to
I'm
think of
easy. I'm easy.
I
You're not
know.
negotiating with me.
That's true. Okay, let's see. We've gone through a lot of these.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah, please.
Who gave you the flowers that are behind you?
These are actually from my friend Allison, who does some floral work on the side, and actually showed up with my house with a huge thing of flowers, and she made like 5 different arrangements late the night before yesterday. So yeah.
Yay, Allison.
Allison's awesome. We actually met in Vietnam, speaking of Vietnam earlier, randomly like 6-7 years ago. So small, cool world. Yeah, and we're still friends. But let's see. So actually I have a question for you. What's in the background on your wall? What is that picture?
Well, the picture is the Palace at Versailles.
Oh, okay. Very nice.
So yeah, I took my son and I went there when he was younger, and it was a great trip for us, and I've got some great memories of Versailles.
That's wonderful. Okay, so last quick question, then we'll move on to other questions is, so if you are in sales, if you were in sales and you were maybe doing a lot of cold calling or cold emailing, you might not have as much intel as you often had on a lot of hostage negotiations, although I don't know, maybe sometimes there wasn't a lot of intel on some of those. But what do you do when you don't know much about the other party that you're negotiating with, and you're not even face to face with them? You're doing it over the phone or email, and you've never interacted with them before. Do you have any tips that just sort of apply in those situations, especially if you have no idea who they are or very little?
Yeah, you know, and hostage negotiators actually, although we try to get information on somebody before we pick up the phone, you know, we rehearsed picking up the phone with someone that we had nothing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So first thing is say your name, and don't get real elaborate. Like, you know, how many salespeople do we get calls from? You know, somebody calls me on the phone, and I'll answer the phone. I'll say, Chris Voss, and there'll be hesitation, and then they'll say, may I speak to Chris Voss? All right. So I already said that.
Yeah.
You just showed me you're not listening. And then they'll launch into their sales pitch, and there'll be a couple minutes in it, and I'll have no idea who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And it's really easy for me to hang up on somebody who hasn't even given me his name. So, you know, the flip side, hey, I call up, and if I'm hitting somebody call, they say, hi, I'm Chris. I don't say anything any more than that. Now, if I want somebody's time, I know how much time I need to keep them on the phone in order to get to the next step. And typically, everybody's got 4 minutes. Everybody's got 3 minutes. You probably only need a minute to get them interested. And inside of 3 minutes, you're going to know whether or not they're going to move forward anyway. They're going to hang up on you. You're going to have a relationship. So the approach would be, I'm Chris. I promise you I need no more than 3 minutes. I guarantee you if we're not done in 3 minutes, I'm going to get off the phone. Now you got somebody cold. They're no longer hostage because they're no longer wondering how long they're going to be on the phone. So I will, when I call somebody, cold or no, I will always tell them how much time I want, and I make sure I'm done in less time than they gave me. Because then if I get another phone call, you know, the last impression is the lasting impression. They're going to remember, hey, they only wanted 3 minutes and they got done in less than that. So I can look at my watch when the phone rings. If I have 5, I've been conditioned that I'm going to be off the phone with this person in 3, and now we've triggered a succession of conversations that the other person is comfortable with. They don't feel they've been held hostage.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first thing you worry about when a salesperson gets you on the phone is, how long am I going to be on the phone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if I know I'm not going to be on the phone for any longer than 3 minutes, I can give somebody 3 minutes to find out what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's something to that too, by actually following through with it, because you show that you made good on your promise, whether they think about it or it's just in their subconscious. You are someone who sticks by their word.
Right. And they'll take the next call.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay, so let's do some questions from the audience. Let's see, there's a lot of different ones. I think we've covered a lot of the past ones, but do you have any new ones, audience? And if not, I'll ask another one. I'll ask another one while we're waiting. So I actually have thought about this a little bit. So I have spent a lot of time in East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. And some of the negotiation skills I picked up were actually hustling in bazaars in Turkey and Egypt and different parts of the Middle East when I was a lot younger. So I would try to negotiate.
You know, you make yourself sound like an international arms dealer. Is that movie War Dogs? Is that about you?
No, I'm better than that. No, I spent, my mom's family is originally from Turkey, and so I spent various summers when I was younger hanging out in Turkey, and then I would take buses around the country on my own. I would just sort of get away with doing whatever, and then I would befriend the rug dealers, and I would just ask if I could like watch them in exchange for like helping them with some small thing, or like writing something on their website or whatever for them in English. And then I would watch them hustle in English and Turkish and whatever languages they spoke. And it was so interesting. Well, their tactics are kind of the same. They would tailor them depending on what country the people who were coming into the shop are from. So if there's someone from Japan versus like Russia versus Brazil versus China, they had a little bit different strategies. And so while I think people are people universally, and reciprocity is the same universally, I think there are a little bit of differences depending on where they're from. Even because, you know, you could assume people from certain countries in those cases made more or less money. But beyond that, with your hostage negotiation, because I know you've done a lot of international work, have you ever tailored things more or less to people from a certain country? And if so, how? Why? What did you do?
Well, you know, that's a good question, because, you know, why I don't want to say that, you know, I say this is cross-cultural. I'm also not ignoring culture.
Mm-hmm.
So we start out as human beings. And, you know, the Turkish rug merchants, who are phenomenal bargainers and just endearing, relentless soft sell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Relentless soft sell.
That's so true.
All right, so they know that this is a way to get your foot in the door with everybody. You know, what are the universal principles that apply to everybody? Now, you can make some educated guesses, you know, and I like to refer to these as cold reads. Mm-hmm. Now you start to get a context of someone's, not just what country they're from, what culture they're from, but now you start to get some information on based on their gender, their age, mm-hmm. What their experience is in that culture. I mean, what's the recipe for Americans? Well, are you talking about an American from New York City, or are you talking about an American from Birmingham, Alabama? Well, wait, aren't those both Americans? You know, if you're talking about Vietnamese, we're just in Vietnam.
North or south?
You know, what's the difference? Yeah. North or south, right? So, you know, and so there's some basic predictions you can start to make on cultures, but understand that there's all sorts of subcultures. Mm-hmm. And then pretty soon you're going to pivot right straight into the individual. Now you're really honing in on what the person is resonating with. So the hostage negotiation skills are really about creating a feedback loop mm-hmm. between you and the other person, so that now you begin to refine your approach even more and more based on who they are as an individual. So I'm not making it sound like I want to ignore culture. I'm lessening it. Yeah. And the hierarchy of what I'm going to look at. I'm going to start with they're a human being, and then I'm probably going to move past culture pretty fast because how old they are and what they do for a living is going to tell me a lot more about them than the broad parameters of their culture. That's some information there, but we're going to go in even deeper with them as a person.
That's great. So to answer someone in the audience's question, yes, we will have a recording. You'll get an email after. To bring up someone else's question that I think is really interesting, small talk and rapport building, how much do you use it? I think sometimes it comes off as disingenuous when it's not done well. And I think some people are better at it and more comfortable at it than others. So what's your take on small talk?
Well, small talk is good if you're actually listening.
That's a great point.
Like if I say, how are you today? And you say, it's been a tough day. And then I say, hey, have you ever been to a Dodgers game? I wasn't listening. So small talk is disingenuous if you're not listening.
Yeah.
If I ask you a question, I don't care about the answer. And so all you're going to do is listen. All you're going to do is pay attention. And small talk is fine. Find out about the person. Small talk is actually really important if you're trying to get a feel for who someone is. And if you're not, then the other side's going to pick it up really quick, and you are going to be disingenuous.
Do you have any go-to small talk questions that you like to ask people?
Well, other than, I don't like saying, how's it going today?
Yeah.
I like to take a look at them and make an educated guess based on what I'm seeing. And that's completely different because now I'm interested in them. I'll say, you can look at somebody and know whether or not it's been a good day.
Yeah.
So you either say long day, or you say, hey, looks like it's been a good day. And now, boom, you're in there interacting.
So you like to take a stronger position. That's one of the things I'm getting, that and maybe not always, but if you're not sure, but it seems like in general you'll prefer to take a stronger position to stand out and be more memorable and cut through faster. Would that be correct?
I think that's a good assessment. That's right, to use your magic word.
Okay, and then I know we only have a couple minutes left, but if you can talk a little bit about labeling a little bit more. And it says, can you provide more examples of using labeling, but maybe small, fast examples where this is what the label is, this is what you do.
Right. So I would say to that person, I said, it seems like that question's important to you. So a label is designed to be short and sweet and succinct. It seems like, it sounds like, it looks like, you seem, you sound, you look, it feels like. Let me draw a contrast. It's not somebody saying, well, what I'm hearing is, there's actually a really tactical choice between the words I and you.
Yes.
Both of them strike the ear and the brain differently. I is self-centered, you is engaging. You can also be accusing. So you have to understand what that word does.
Yeah.
But a label is just an observation. It's a demonstration of awareness. Again, it's creating this feedback loop between you and the person so you can dial more into them. You can have a better relationship, or you can give them a better value statement. You can focus what you're presenting more on their actual needs and not waste time on what's not. So it's just an observation, but it ends up being ridiculously powerful.
Absolutely. So we really appreciate your time, Chris. So where you can find more out about Chris would be on his website. It's Black Swan, what is the last part of it, .com?
BlackSwanLTD.com.
Not Nassim Taleb's Black Swan. Great name, though. And you can also pick up the book, which I really recommend you do, on Amazon or from a bookstore. Never Split the Difference. And you have a link on the website as well, right?
Yeah, we do. And let me throw one last thing in there. The short, sweet, quick, easy one is send us a text. Send a text to 22828. The number is 22828. And the text should be "That's right," with no punctuation and no spaces, just THATSRIGHT. All one word, no punctuation, no apostrophe. That'll sign you up for this complimentary newsletter that we put out. It'll also show you information on what we're doing, training, lots of other things that we have. Quite a few things that we have is complimentary, which means it's free. So just send "That's right" to 22828, and you can get dialed into us really fast.
And we'll be sharing links to the book and the blog and the recording after this. You'll hear from me, and you'll probably hear from Chris as well.
Thank you very much for having me as a guest.
Yeah,
I
it was
love the
wonderful. I
conversation.
did too. Well, come on in Vietnamese and have a great one. Happy cooling, everyone. Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.